You wish to know how a vampire is born?
So, you wish to know how a vampire is born?
Get out! Get out! You brought it! You let it
never begins with fangs or blood. It begins with pain, with hunger, with the moment something inside breaks. These are 4 stories that will change the way you see vampires. Not as monsters, so as what we could all become. Night was breaking. The shadows, once thick and obedient, began to unravel beneath her feet, growing thin, brittle, unreliable. Serana ran, barefoot over moss and stone, through trees that clawed at her robes and memory alike. Her breath came shallow, though not from exhaustion. It was the sun, the dreadful, inevitable sun. It hunted her in a way no man ever could. She had misjudged the distance. A few minutes more, and her shadow step would have returned her safely to the dark hold buried beneath the mountain spine. But arrogance and nostalgia had delayed her. Now she was paying for both. The forest gave way to an open field, and beyond it, perched like an afterthought upon the earth, stood a house, large, old, wood-beamed and stone-backed, reclusive, removed from time, a sanctuary. She crossed the field like a dying ember, smouldering as the first hints of sunlight licked the horizon. Her body screamed for shadow, for soil, for the cold breath of safety. The house had no wards, no symbols, no salt at the threshold, just a door that opened when she willed it, soft as a sigh, silent as a confession. Inside, darkness. Cool, patient darkness. The kind that waited, rather than crept. She staggered into the hall, her limbs trembling, not from fear, but hunger. And the curse. The sun outside now painted the edges of the windows gold. She sank into the deep corner of the drawing room, where the shadows held firm, letting the black cling to her skin like balm. No one was there. But then, music. A faint scratch, a soft swell, a cello, aching its way into the air. It was not from a phone or a screen. It was the haunted crackle of vinyl, the breathing ghost of a record player. Serana moved toward it like a phantom, gliding through shadow, careful to avoid the creeping daylight on the floorboards. She saw him. A man. Late 20s, perhaps. Unshaven, not in the careless way of youth, but the way of someone who no longer kept count. He sat in a worn armchair, one hand resting on the side of his face, eyes not open or closed, but lost in something far beyond the walls around him. He did not see her. Not yet. She studied him. The music he played was not cheerful. It was not meant to be. It was something else, like grief, that had learned to sit still. He listened not for pleasure, but understanding, as if the strings of the cello might unpick the knots in his chest. What haunts him, she wondered. What silence does he feed with such sound? But beneath the curiosity, hunger. The throb of it, the burn behind the ribs, the calling in her blood. She stepped forward, a little more, enough to feel the beat of his heart from across the room. It would be so easy, so effortless, to end it, take, feed, leave. But Eldritch's words returned to her, sharp as glass. If you do not know their pain, you do not deserve their blood. If you do not see their truth, you are only a monster with teeth. She clenched her jaw. That voice again. Always him, always echoing. And yet, she had listened. She had changed, hadn't she? Still, she remembered, there was a time when she would have drunk him dry and smiled as he fell. She had done it before, dozens of times. A century ago, her thirst had been laced with fury, a fury that burned for every slight, every betrayal, every loss. Back then, Serana had wanted the world to drown, not in blood, in obedience. She did not simply want to survive the humans. She wanted to end them, to rule over the ashes of their kingdoms, with a throne carved from their gods. She was their reckoning, or so she believed. But now, crouched in shadows in another man's home, she felt something unfamiliar press against her ribs. Shame. It crawled like frost, slow, uninvited. She watched the man reach forward and gently flip the record. The needle crackled again. Another song, slower, darker, a requiem for something unnamed. Who are you? She wondered again. What pain do you carry? And could it taste like mine? She did not move. The hunger whispered, a constant, coiling thing, but Serana remained still, her body hidden where the light dared not reach. The man had not seen her. Not yet. Not fully. She watched from the dark like a ghost too ashamed to haunt. Outside, morning had come. The golden blaze of it poured in through the windows, spilling across the wooden floors like molten judgment. She turned her gaze toward it and immediately recoiled. Even the reflection of sunlight was agony. Her eyes ached. Her skin winced. She had once danced in firelight as a girl. Now even the echo of day threatened to unmake her. But the shadows remained her refuge. As long as she did not cross the line where gold met gloom, she was safe. She curled deeper into the shadowed corner, her back against the cold stone wall. The music played on, strings that mourned and rose as if someone had taught the cello how to cry without a voice. And then he spoke. At first, it was a murmur, the kind spoken not to a person, but to a memory. It's always the ones you give everything to, he said, eyes not leaving the spinning vinyl. The ones you tear yourself open for, that end up slipping the knife between your ribs. Serana tilted her head. His voice carried weight, but not rage. The sharpness had dulled. This wasn't fresh pain. This was settled pain, the kind that no longer screams. It just sits beside you and stays. I thought I knew her, he continued, quieter now. I did everything right. I gave her everything. I listened. I was there and still. His hand tightened into a fist, not angry, just needing to hold something. Still, she left. Still, she lied. Still, she looked me in the eye like I meant nothing, like I never existed. The words bled out, like old wounds reopening. The man leaned forward, elbows on knees, staring down at the floor as though the grain in the wood might offer answers. I know it's my fault, he said, after a pause. Somehow, I don't even know how. But it always is, isn't it? Serana watched him closely now. The shape of his sorrow was familiar. Too familiar. The ache of it made something shift inside her, something older than blood, older than the hunger. She knew this pain, not as a predator, but as the girl she once was. Before fangs, before eternity, she saw it now, not in the man's face, but in the way he curled into himself, that hollow space where love had once sat. She had carried that same emptiness long ago. She too had been left, lied to, broken. She had been betrayed, and the girl that rose from those ashes had become a monster. He sat still for some time. The record had ended. The room held its breath, and then he moved. Serana did not blink. The shadows around her pulsed slightly, as if they too knew what was coming. The man stood slowly, not with purpose, but the weight of exhaustion. His limbs carried the slump of someone not simply tired, but finished. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered. To no one, or to everyone, he walked across the room, not fast, not slow, just inevitable. His bare feet quiet on the wooden floor. He opened a drawer, searched, found a knife. The kind used in kitchens, not rituals. Ordinary, plain, final. Serana leaned forward, just slightly in the dark, instinctively. The old hunger stirred. A decade ago, even a century ago, she would have welcomed this. A soul about to slip, easy to take, easy to silence. No struggle, no consequence. But that was before Eldritch, before winter, before she had learned that pain was not permission. She narrowed her eyes, studying him, not to feed, but to understand. The man held the knife in trembling hands, turned it slightly, so the edge caught what little morning light remained. He brought it close to his wrist. Then he looked up. "Are you watching?" he asked. Not to Serana, but to something greater. "Are you watching now? All those prayers I whispered when I was younger. You never answered. Never. So why the hell should I ask now?" His voice cracked. "You gave me love and ripped it away. You gave me hope and pissed on it. You gave me life. But what for? Just to watch me fall?" His breath stuttered. His grip tightened. Serana remained in the shadows, still unseen, still silent. She could speak. She could stop him. She could say, "You are not your pain. You are not the betrayal. You are the one who felt it and still breathes. Pain is not your name. It is the storm that shapes you. You are not a victim. You are the fire that refuses to die, even in the rain." She could tell him what Eldritch had told her, what winter had made her become, that the human spirit is not the wound, but the will to rise in spite of it. But she did not speak, because the moment was not hers, it was his. And then, just as quietly as it had begun, he let the knife slip from his hand. It fell to the floor with a soft clatter that sounded louder than thunder. He didn't cry. He didn't kneel. He just breathed. Walked back to the record player. He placed the needle gently down on the vinyl. The strings began again, sorrowful, distant, alive. And he sat like before in that same old chair. And then he spoke, softer this time, not to the sky, not to a god, not even to himself. "I cannot. I want to, but I cannot." He exhaled. "If I quit, I lose, and I've lost enough already. Maybe there's something left. I don't know what it is, but I feel something." From the corner of the room, hidden deep within the shadows, Serana felt something too. Not hunger, not power. Something quieter, something warmer, something human. And for the first time in a very long time, she let it stay. The record spun slowly now, a ghost dragging its fingers across the strings. Notes stretched long and fragile, as though even the music was too tired to go on. The man sat, then stood. He wasn't restless, just empty. A vessel rattling quietly in a house that no longer felt like home. He looked up, not at the ceiling, not at God, just up, as if that might help his words fall somewhere besides the floor. "I cannot go on," he said. Sorana listened, motionless in the dark. Something inside her stilled. "I have nothing. I don't see the point. I don't see any point. In 100 years, someone else will live in this house. In 100 years, no one will remember my name. In 100 years, the money I saved, the things I cared about, they'll be someone else's concern. So what's the point? Why am I here?" His voice wasn't angry now. It was smaller than that, a thread unraveling. "For years I prayed. For years I believed. I gave. I forgave. I stayed kind. I stayed good. I never cheated. Never betrayed anyone. I made mistakes when I was young, sure, but nothing cruel. I lived right." He looked down at his hands as if they were some failed promise. "And I got nothing for it." He took a breath that sounded too old for his young face. No signs, no guidance, no whisper in the dark. Nothing to say, "You're seen." Nothing to say, "It mattered." Sorana's fingers gripped the edges of her hiding place. His words. They were hers once. She had said the same thing once, on her knees in a church long buried beneath time. Begging, bleeding, abandoned. She stepped forward, just once. The motion was slow, deliberate, not to threaten, not to consume, but to exist, to be seen. A sliver of her figure caught the faint rim of light on the floor. A shadow moved, then a form. He turned. He saw her. At first, terror, pure instinctual. His body flinched, breath caught. A woman stepped out from the shadows like sorrow made flesh. Long black hair, pale skin, red lips that had not smiled in a century, eyes heavy with ages of silence. But she didn't move closer. She didn't bare her teeth. She only spoke. "I have watched you in your pain," she said. Her voice was velvet and ash. "I have watched you fight a battle. I have fought 1,000 times. Do not give in." He stared, his voice barely a whisper. "Are you my sign?" The question hung in the air like breath in winter. And Sorana, the monster, the myth, the memory of everything broken, did not laugh, did not strike, did not vanish. She simply stood there, the shadow of a woman who had once asked the same question, to a god who never answered. But perhaps...
For those who connect with the words of Professor Shadow, for those the stories touch, deeper. The Vault holds more: full audiobooks, Secret Lore, the Becoming the Professor course, the Eldritch Codex. New tales added weekly, only for those ready to go deeper. Click the join button below and unlock the Vault.
Perhaps she was the answer now. They sat opposite one another. The record long stopped. The silence now deeper than music. He, Nathan, had not moved since she stepped from the shadows. The only sound was the wind brushing the old glass panes and the quiet ache of a fire that had never been lit. Sorana did not attempt to hide what she was. She had revealed herself, not fully, not yet, but enough to let truth breathe in the room like smoke. Nathan rubbed his hands together, not from cold, from thought. "I meant what I said," he murmured. "I still don't see the point. Life, I've tried, but I'm alone, forgotten, passed over. What is the purpose of any of it?" Sorana tilted her head, as if she'd been waiting for that question for a century. The purpose of life, she said slowly, is not given. It is made. Nathan frowned. That sounds like something written on a poster in a therapist's office. Sarana smiled, just slightly. No, that would say, believe in yourself. This is different. This is fire. He leaned forward. Then tell me, really, what is it? The point of staying? Of trying again? What stops us from quitting, when quitting makes more sense? Sarana looked at him, and for a moment, she wasn't the predator, the relic, the vampire. She was simply the one who had lived. What stops us is the part of us that still remembers we are ourselves, she said. The part that was not broken, the part that still burns even when everything around us is ash. That small, stubborn spark that whispers, I am not done yet. Nathan looked down. But what if that spark goes out? Sarana's voice grew quieter. Then it is you who must relight it. She leaned in. You are not here to be remembered. You are not here to be thanked. You are not here to be granted purpose by another man, another god, another system. You are here to become, to build your soul as one builds a cathedral with vision, sweat, defiance, and glory, to create yourself, thought by thought, act by act, and not for applause, not for reward, but because you exist. Nathan blinked. But if I fail, then fail beautifully, she said. But do not vanish, do not surrender. That is the only real sin, not loss, but erasure. He sat still, words caught in his throat, and then he saw it. A glint, a flicker, a flash of something beneath her lip. A fang. His voice broke. What are you? Sarana stood, her silhouette framed in the fading light. She did not hiss. She did not step forward. She only said, I am what happens when someone does give up, when pain is allowed to reshape the soul into something sharp, when the fire is not used to build, but to burn. She turned to him, not as a monster, but as a warning. You are at a choice. Either you carve yourself from the stone of this sorrow, or you let the darkness carve you. The room was silent again, but something had changed. In him, and perhaps in her, the air between them had grown still again. The room had not changed. Same broken light, same dust in the air, but something in him had shifted, and she saw it. Nathan stared at her for a long moment, then softly, almost childlike, I know what you are. She didn't flinch. You're a vampire, he continued. I've seen the movies. You came out of the shadow. You haven't breathed once. And I saw your fang. If I had that, if I had what you have, it would be so much better. The strength, the power, the escape. Something in Sarana snapped. She didn't move forward, didn't need to. Her presence alone hit him like a thunderclap. Her eyes narrowed. Her voice, when it came, was a storm barely leashed. You fool! Nathan instinctively pulled back. Do you think this is a gift? She hissed. You think this power makes anything better? She stepped closer, her face a breath away from fury. You see a fan and think it means freedom. You see a shadow and think it means control. But what you don't see, what you never see in your stories, is what it costs. She turned from him, as if speaking to a world that never listened. This is not life. This is unlife. Hunger without end. Days that bleed into years until memory decays, until joy is no longer a word, just a sound. You don't feel any more. Not really. You consume, you endure, you rot slower. Then she turned back, her voice low but cutting, the way only truth can be. You say, if you had what I have, it would be better. But what I have is what happens when someone gives up. When you surrender, not just hope, but self. You do not want this, not if there is even a flicker of fire left in you, not if you still feel. Because the moment you become what I am, you stop being what you could be. Nathan looked at her, stunned, sobered, silent, and Sarana, cold, immortal, once a god among the dying, told him a truth he would never forget. There was a village once. She stared past the walls now, past the present, into the black corridors of memory. A small one, north of the mountains. They mocked me when I was young, hurt me, humiliated me. When I changed, when I became, I returned. Her voice dropped. I didn't destroy the village. I erased it. Nathan swallowed. The women, the men, the children, even the animals. I wiped them from the face of the earth, not in rage, not in fire, in silence, because I could, because there was no one left in me to say no. She looked at him now, and there was no hunger in her eyes, only sorrow. That is not power, that is absence, the complete erasure of self, of principle, of meaning. She stepped closer again, gently this time. You still ask what the point of life is. I will tell you. She held his gaze. The point is to never let the world make you less than what you know yourself to be. Not for a woman, not for a god, not for pain, not even for death. Nathan looked at her, not in fear now, but in reverence. She, the monster, had just given him the most human gift of all, a reason not to become her. The record had stopped. The light through the windows had gone. Outside the world was wrapped in velvet, and only now did Sarana notice. She turned toward the window. The sun was long buried. The sky above was black and endless, pierced by stars that looked down like silent witnesses. She blinked slowly. It's night, she murmured. Already. They had spoken the whole day away. In another lifetime, she would have vanished the moment darkness returned, back to her hidden world, her ancient refuge. She had no chains here, no wards held her. She was free. She could leave, or feed, and yet she lingered. Nathan spoke first, his voice gentler now, as if shaped by gratitude rather than despair. I know you must go, he said, but I feel like you really were the sign I was looking for. Sarana turned to him. I have been called many things, she said. Monster, myth, mistake, but never a sign. Her lips curved just slightly, a shadow of something warm. But if it helps you, so be it. She began to walk toward the door, slow and soundless. The night air whispered through the cracks, welcoming her home. But Nathan stood. He spoke again, firmer now. I have never met someone like you, not just because of what you are, but because of what you said. She paused. Those words, he continued, I knew them. Somewhere deep inside, I just couldn't reach them. They were scattered, like broken pieces of a mirror. I knew the shape, but I couldn't see myself in them. You helped me put them back together. And now, I feel like I'm not just ready to stand again. I'm ready to ignite the fire within me. Sarana did not speak for a long moment, and when she did, her voice was almost reverent. "Then I have done more this night than I have in the last 100 years." She turned once more, the dark around her now folding like wings. "I must go." Nathan stepped forward, but did not chase her. His voice cracked, sincere. "Please, come again. Visit me. You are the strength that helped me this day." She looked at him, and something moved in her. Not hunger, not memory, but a recognition, a truth that burned quietly in the soul she once thought dead. Her final words, spoken into the stillness, echoed with the weight of someone who had once been lost, and now, perhaps, was not. "We do not exist to be remembered. We exist to remember ourselves. And in doing so, we become worthy of the fire within." Then she vanished into the night, not as shadow, not as death, but as something becoming. One week had passed. The house was the same. Old wood, cracked stone, shadows that clung to the edges of thought, but Nathan had changed. He stood now in the heart of a glass tower downtown, high above the noise of the city. His office was sharp, minimal, controlled. He was no ordinary employee. He never had been. He just forgot. Executive-level strategist for a global architecture firm. The kind of job people envy but rarely understand. The pressure was high, the consequences higher, but Nathan walked with certainty now. Not arrogance, just a quiet, sovereign resolve. His voice was clear, measured. "Move the Casimir proposal to Wednesday. Tell Lee we're keeping the preliminary model but revising the sequence. And get Morgan in here. We need to finalise the Dubai report today, not next week." He wasn't barking orders. He was directing reality, coordinating ideas, action, purpose, all aligned. People listened, not out of fear, out of clarity. He returned to his desk, ready to review the numbers, when he overheard something from across the room. Two younger team members, one dawdling at a task that had long since passed its deadline, the other teasing him. "Come on, man. Do you want to live forever?" Nathan paused. Something in the phrase chilled him, not with fear, but memory. He walked over, calm, composed. "I heard what you said." The two looked up, nervous. Nathan gave a half smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Let me tell you something about that question. Do you want to live forever?" He looked past them now, to something they couldn't see. "There's a passage I once read, from a philosopher few people read anymore. She said that if a robot could live forever, if it were indestructible, invulnerable, untouchable, it could have no values." The two looked confused. Nathan continued, "Why?" "Because it could never lose, never die. It would have no reason to choose one thing over another. It would have no urgency, no meaning. Purpose only matters because life can be lost, because time does run out. That's what makes effort sacred." He looked at them, fully present. "So no, I don't want to live forever. I just want to live fully, purposefully, before I don't." The silence that followed was honest, and then he turned, walked back to his desk, and returned to building the life he had nearly abandoned, brick by brick, value by value, thought by thought. Somewhere, a record might have been playing, but he didn't need music to remember the night that saved him. He only needed fire. They call him Sebastian now. If you've ever passed a house, too quiet, with curtains that never move, he might still be there. Not resting, not hiding, just waiting for a reason to rise again. This is not your typical vampire story. It's not about blood or monsters. It's a mirror held up to those who chase immortality, thinking the grass is greener beyond the grave. But what waits there isn't life without death, it's death without purpose. Chapter 1. The Elder in the Garden. They call me Sebastian now. A simple name, the kind whispered by neighbours behind the veil of hedges, the kind that fits neatly on a letterbox. Not carved in stone, not howled through battlefields. Just Sebastian. A man who lives quietly in a modest house at the edge of a village that's grown fat with forgetfulness. The house is old, but not ancient. Brick, not stone. A porch with faded wood. A roof that creaks. A door that hasn't been locked in decades. Ivy clings to the walls like memory. I never invite anyone in. I don't need to. They deliver parcels, trim the front hedge. Someone mows the lawn every Sunday. I've never asked who. No one knocks twice. No one stays long. They sense it. The wrongness. The cold. It's better this way. They think me eccentric. A relic with thinning hair and heavy eyes. They don't see the shadow behind my gaze. The weight that never shifts. They don't know that behind the curtains I have sat in the same chair for over a century, unmoved by time, untouched by the world. I do not sleep because I'm tired. I sleep because I fear what I might do if I did not. Once I was someone. Once I mattered. I was born Sebastian Virel of House Virel, a noble name, draped in silk and whispered across courtyards. I walked with pride, spoke with certainty. I was not good. I was not cruel. I was sovereign. And then came the night. A carriage wheel cracked in the dark. I remember the cold of the mud, the howl that wasn't wind, and a figure, gaunt and silent, watching from the tree line. They didn't pounce. They glided. And when their hand touched my throat, it was like frost laced with fire. They didn't feed, not fully. They tasted. Then they left me, not slain, not saved, just changed. I died in that ditch, but something lingered, something waited. And when the sun rose, I was already gone, risen, not resurrected. I returned the next night with eyes that did not blink, and a thirst that did not end. I fed, without hesitation, without guilt. And I grew. I discovered strength in shadow. I crossed rooftops without sound. I stood on cathedral spires and laughed at the notion of heaven. I ruled without crown or court. I was an elder, not by ceremony, but by instinct. The others felt it. They yielded. I walked through cemeteries barefoot. I silenced armies. I drank the screams of tyrants and poets alike. I was not evil. I was eternal. Power was not the drug. The drug was clarity. I saw the world as it was, not as they pretended, frail, pretending at permanence, screaming against the dark. And I was the dark. But time is not an enemy. Time is erosion. The hunger faded, not sated, just bored. Victories grew smaller. Blood lost its taste. Art lost its colour. Even cruelty grew dull. I lived long enough to watch my own shadow stretch thin. Now I sit in a chair that groans beneath me. I drink tea I do not need. I watch the sun set and do not flinch. They think I am resting, but I am waiting. For what? I do not know. I have not fed in 72 years, not out of virtue, not out of guilt, but because I have no desire. I am the immortal robot, a thing that cannot die, and therefore has no values. And yet I fear death, not the fire, not the sun, not the stake, but what comes after. I know what waits beyond this body, beyond this shell. I have seen the whispers in dreams. I have heard his name in the places where shadows hum. Nocturna, the god of vampires, the father of hunger, the devourer of remembrance. If I die, I do not sleep. I descend to his realm, to his feeding grounds, where this I, is torn apart and folded into the eternal appetite, where even memory is chewed and swallowed. There is no freedom there, only need. So I do not feed, and I do not die. I simply sit, not alive, not dead, not suffering, just silent. And that, perhaps, is the worst fate of all. Chapter 2. The Throne of Bones. There was a time I thought this silence was strength, a time when stillness was not surrender, but poise, when waiting was not weariness, but control. I sat then, as I sit now, but I did not sit alone. I sat upon bodies. I stood above battlefields I did not fight in. I walked through cathedrals stripped of their crosses, through cities hushed by my presence alone. I fed on kings and killers, on mothers who wept and monsters who begged. I drank not for survival, but because I could. That was power, not necessity, not hunger, dominance. I remember a night, not the exact one they blur now, but one of the many where I stood at the centre of a ruined village, blood still warm beneath my boots. I had drained every living thing within a mile. Children, dogs, priests, soldiers, all of them. Their final screams still clung to the air like morning mist, and I laughed. Not with madness, not with cruelty, with clarity. The world had always pretended at fairness, but I had peeled it back to its truth. The strong rule, the weak feed them. This was nature, unpainted. I had no need to apologize. I was eternal. I was an elder. I believed then that immortality was the prize, the final victory, to no longer be a thing that could be threatened, to stand above time itself. But time does not kneel. Time does not rage. Time waits, and it erodes. At first, I thought it was the blood that dulled. Perhaps the world had become blander. Perhaps their fear was thinner, their lives less vivid. I told myself the centuries had emptied the world of worthy prey. But it was not the world that dulled. It was me. I began to wonder, not aloud, never aloud, why I fed at all. I could go weeks without hunger, then months. I tested it once, a full year, then 2. No thirst, no madness, no decay. I did not need blood to survive, only to feel alive. But if one cannot die, why feel alive? What does a being with no end, no risk, no death actually need? The question crawled through me like rot beneath marble. What needs does the undying have? What meaning can exist for something that cannot lose? And the more I asked, the more I unravelled. Every choice I had made, every indulgence, every cruelty, every conquest, all of them rested on the premise that I had something to gain or lose, that I was gambling with life, even if the odds were always in my favour. But what happens when the game is removed? when nothing you do matters because nothing can take you from the board. Then power becomes parody, desire becomes dust, and eternity becomes a locked room where the door is gone, but the walls remain. I became quiet, not in action, but in essence. I did not rage, I did not weep, I simply stopped. I stopped feeding, not out of morality, not guilt, not some late blooming remorse, but because the act had become meaningless. Blood is a currency of need, but I had none. That was when I first understood what I was becoming. Not a god, not a devil, but something far worse. An echo. A figure still moving out of habit, long after the world had stopped asking him to. I remembered a passage once, something I read when I still believed men had wisdom. It described a creature, not human, something mechanical, immortal, a being that could not be hurt, could not die, and thus had no reason to act. Because if nothing is at stake, then nothing can have value. If you cannot be harmed, then you cannot need. And if you cannot need, then what can you want? What purpose remains? I do not remember where I read it. Perhaps I never did. Perhaps I simply recognize myself. Because I'm that thing now, not a man, not a monster, but a relic without reason. And still, I do not die. Because I know what waits for me beyond the veil. Not peace, not silence, but Nocturna. He, the god of vampires, he who feeds not on bodies, but essence. We were not made to live, we were made to ripen. He gave us this power, not as a gift, but an investment. Each victory, each feeding, each year we endure without rotting. It all sweetens the taste. He feeds best on those who have lived longest. The feeding grounds are not a myth. I have seen them in fractured dreams, a place of shadow, where the strongest elders are torn apart, slowly, beautifully, their memories unwinding like silk into his open mouth. That is why I do not die. That is why I do not move, because I will not be his feast. He made me, yes, but I have become something else, something even he did not foresee. A being without hunger, without movement, without yield. I am no longer a subject of the dark. I am its refusal, and so I sit, and the world forgets me, and Nocturna starves. Chapter 3. What survives and what remains. There is a difference between living and surviving. I see it now, as I sit and watch the ivy reclaim the porch. I see it in the children who pass the gate and dare each other to knock. I see it in the men who deliver their parcels and speak too loudly as they leave, as if volume will drown out instinct. They survive, just as I do, but living, that is something else. I have not lived in a long time, and I do not mean pleasure. I do not mean joy. I mean purpose, the kind that shapes a man's choices, defines his values, and says, "This is who I am." Once, I thought survival was enough. Once, I thought the point of power was to remain longer than others, louder than memory. But now I understand that life, in its truest form, is not mere breath or blood, or years stretched into centuries. It is moral purpose, to live as a being who chooses, not who endures. And that is where my prison lies. Because I endure, I breathe without need, I exist without aim. I have become unmade, not by violence, but by vacancy. And yet I do not die, because death is no better. To die is to descend into Nocturna's realm, to be unravelled, not erased, but fed upon, Slowly, eternally, I would become what he made me for, a long-brewed wine poured into the throat of a god who calls it worship. That is not rest. That is not end. That is consumption without self. So I do not feed, and I do not fall. I remain, and in this fragile, breathless balance, I begin to see what I am. Not a coward, not a relic, but the final echo of what life meant before all of this, before immortality, before hunger, before the shadow whispered that I was more than man. I am not lonely because I am alone. I am lonely because I've met everyone and found no one worth standing beside. Other elders. They gorge themselves like cattle fattening for slaughter. They pretend at glory, but they are ruled by appetite. They feed to silence the truth they refuse to face, that they are no longer real, no longer sovereign. They are wineskins waiting to be poured. And the humans, they beg for immortality without understanding its price. I have seen them claw at old tomes, strike bargains with things older than fear itself, just for a few more decades. They think eternal life is the gift. It is not. It is a test, and they always fail. They see years as proof of greatness. But what is 1,000 years spent drifting? What is survival without creation, without clarity? Time is not the measure of a man. Choice is. I chose to stop feeding, not out of guilt, not out of virtue, but because feeding became survival, and survival became stagnation. And I am not made for rot, but I cannot die either, because dying would be worse. Dying would mean becoming part of him, part of Nocturna. I would be taken into the feeding grounds, a place where elders go not to rest, but to be devoured slowly, where every memory, every earned triumph, every defiant whisper is savoured and stripped away. He loaned us power, not to elevate us, but to deepen our flavour. We are his harvest. That is why he made us long-lived. That is why the strongest among us are the ones who scream the longest in his grasp. And I was among the greatest. I know what I would taste like to him. I know what I carry. And I will not be his feast. So I remain here, between two graves. One physical, one spiritual. To feed again would be to forget who I am. To become one of the cattle. To die would be to lose who I was. To let him peel me apart like a well-aged fruit. So I do neither. Not because I'm strong, not because I'm afraid, but because in this stillness, in this choice, I find a sliver of something I once understood. Integrity. The world calls me lonely, but loneliness, true loneliness, is not the absence of people. It is the absence of equals. There are none left, not among the elders, not among the mortals. And so I sit, not because there is nowhere to go, but because there is no one to walk beside. And until I find something worthy of standing with me, I will not rise. I would rather sit forever in silence than move one step in the wrong direction.
For those who connect with the words of Professor Shadow, for those the stories touch, deeper. The vault holds more: full audiobooks, secret lore, the Becoming the Professor course, the Eldritch Codex. New tales added weekly, only for those ready to go deeper. Click the join button below and unlock the vault.
Chapter 4. But it was not always silence. There was a time, not recent, but not so long ago I have forgotten, when the walls nearly broke. I had gone too long without feeding. The old pulse began to stir, that rhythmic whisper in the back of the mind that once sounded like desire, and later like decay. And in the same breath, the other urge returned, the temptation to step into the sunlight, to end it, to fall to the fire and vanish before he could take me, to escape the weight of it all. Two instincts, two lies. One said, feed and forget. The other said, burn and be free. And for a moment, I was at the edge of both. But I did not feed, and I did not fall, because in that moment I remembered a truth sharper than any blade, the only command I have ever obeyed without being ordered, the moral directive. It came not from instinct, not from duty, but from thought. I whispered it to myself that night, not aloud, but inward, as one might recite a final vow before death. You must not feed. You must not die. You must not surrender to Nocturna. Choose, not by instinct, not by fear, not by duty. Choose the self, or choose the void. And I knew then what I had become. If I fed, I became a beast. If I died, I became a servant. If I chose neither, if I simply endured, out of habit, out of apathy, out of cowardice, then I was no longer in conflict, no longer alive, a monument to nothing, a coward who would not burn and would not live. That is the line I walk now. Not survival, not strength, but fidelity, to a version of myself that once knew what it meant to stand for something, to act not for gain, but for truth. That man is gone, but his vow remains. I live by it now, if live is still the word. I sit here, not because I'm lost, but because I'm chosen. The silence is not weakness, it is discipline. The hunger is not punishment, it is proof. And the loneliness, it is not emptiness, it is integrity. So long as I remain here in thought, in resistance, I am still Sebastian Virel. Not food, not fire, not nothing, but me. And until the world offers me a better choice, I will remain. Chapter 5. The choice they do not see. I see them. Every day they walk past the gate, faces lit by screens, eyes dim with routine. I hear the tired cadence of their lives in the rhythm of their footsteps. They speak of groceries, meetings, bad weather, and better weekends. I see them through the glass, and I see their choices. Not life and death, not hunger or fire. No, theirs is quieter, but not simpler. They wake with a question, though few ever speak it aloud. Do I rise today to become more, or do I survive just enough not to break? It is not so different from my own question. Mine is louder, perhaps, sharper, but not more important. We are all, in the end, faced with a single choice, to become or to dissolve. I once thought mortals had it easier, that their brevity gave their days meaning, that death made everything matter. But I see now that most of them do not live under the pressure of time. They live beneath the weight of fear, the fear that if they try and fail, they will lose the illusion of safety they've made for themselves. So they don't try, they do not create, they do not risk, they do not step into greatness because they might stumble. And in doing so, they choose emptiness. They work jobs they hate. They love people they resent. They silence the voice that once whispered, "You could be more." And they call it maturity, or realism, or patience. But I know what it is. It is the same force that presses against my own chest. It is the voice that says, "Don't reach, don't rise. It's easier to stay still." I live beside them, though they do not know it. A spectre with the same dilemma. They wake wondering if they should give up. I wake wondering if I should disappear forever. They ache from the boredom of their routines. I ache from the weight of knowing I am capable of more, but must not move, must not fall, must not feed. They numb themselves with distractions. I numb myself with silence. They say things like, "It's too late for me," or "I'll start tomorrow." I said once, "Perhaps I will rise today," and then I didn't. But here's the difference. They choose nothing, thinking it is safety. I choose stillness, because I refuse to become something I am not. They surrender before they begin. I endure because the alternative is worse. I have lived long enough to see the pattern etched into every age. Most people do not fail. They refuse to begin. They bury their potential beneath comfort and call it survival. But survival without purpose is not life. It is a soft death, one that never screams. And so I sit, as they do, but I do not pretend. I know what I'm doing. I know what I am not doing. That knowledge is agony, but it is also clarity. They could have been artists, warriors, builders of something eternal, but they traded it for a schedule and a salary and a sigh at the end of every day. They could have become, but they chose to drift. And if there is a hell outside of Nocturna's moor, it is a life unlived, a self never reached. They fear the pain of trying, but they never feel the deeper ache, the one that comes from knowing you could have been something vast. And I, monster, relic, shadow, I understand them. I am them, but unlike them, I know what I've chosen. I live beside the void. I do not run from it. I look into it every day and say, "Not yet. Not until I know it will not consume who I am. Not until I have fulfilled what I was meant to be, or proved, beyond all doubt, that nothing remains. Until then, I will not move, but I will remember. And in remembering, I remain." Chapter 6. The choice remains. The house still stands. It leans slightly now, though no one notices. The porch sighs beneath the weight of time, and ivy has climbed higher than it did last year. The roof tiles have shifted with the wind. A window remains forever half-shuttered. The curtains never open. The mail still comes. The hedge still gets trimmed. Children still dare each other to run past the gate, laughing too loud to hide the unease. And behind the windows, in a room no one enters, he waits. Sebastian Virel, he does not move, he does not feed, he does not die. He is not asleep, he is not gone, he is thinking. Still, you see, it was never a story about a vampire. Not really. It was never about blood or immortality, or gods who devour from beyond the veil. It was about choice, the choice each of us faces. Every day, in 1,000 quiet moments, we pretend do not matter, to rise or retreat, to build or surrender, to become or dissolve. Most people will never be bitten in the dark, but they will be tempted by comfort, by fear, by silence. They will feel the slow death of routine, the soft decay of never asking more of themselves. They will think they have time, and then one day they will wake and wonder if they've already become something less than they were meant to be. Not evil, not broken, just unfinished. Like him, we are not vampires, but we too can become immortal robots, beings who go through motions without meaning, who survive without purpose, who choose neither the void nor the fire, and in doing so, become monuments to nothing. But there is another way. To choose the self. To risk everything in order to become everything. To live with hunger, not for blood, but for clarity, for creation, for becoming more than what yesterday allowed. If you walk past a house one day, old, quiet, forgotten, and you see the curtains drawn too tightly, perhaps he is still in there, still refusing to feed, still refusing to fall, still choosing, day after day, the only thing that ever truly mattered, to remain himself, because the other options, survival without purpose, or death without integrity, would mean surrendering the last thing he has, his self. And maybe that's the only real lesson here. Not how to live forever, not how to avoid pain, but how to make a choice that leaves you intact, even if the world forgets you, even if no one stands beside you, even if you must sit in silence for a century. If the choice keeps you you, then it was never silence. It was victory.
It's fake. Worst fake I've ever seen. I knew it was a hoax. There's nothing here.
Get out! Get out! You brought it! You led it here!
What is that?
Claire Holloway lived alone by choice. A quiet flat on the second floor of a crumbling Victorian house in South London suited her just fine. Peeling walls, uneven floors and all, it had a charm. And more importantly, it had solitude. She worked remotely as a freelance copy editor, cleaning up the grammar of people who were more confident than they were competent. Most days, her world existed between screens and silence. She liked it that way. Claire wasn't a recluse, just untethered. Since her mother died 2 winters ago, there had been no real anchor in her life, no obligation pulling her to anyone or anything. She filled the quiet with podcasts, books on urban legends, and a steady diet of digital oddities. Not to believe them, but to debunk them. She prided herself on spotting camera tricks, audio manipulations, lighting cheats. "Nothing haunts me," she used to joke. "I haunt the fakes." That night, a Friday in October, smelled like autumn and burnt toast. Rain freckled the window panes while Claire curled her feet beneath her on the sofa. A knock at the door broke the silence, sharp and cheerful. "It's open!" she called. In came Marcy, her oldest friend, wearing a puff jacket too big for her frame, and a grin that meant gossip. They hugged, exchanged the usual complaints about the weather, and soon sat sipping red wine over take-out containers. "So," Marcy began between bites, "have you seen the video?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "Which one?" "The Shadow Man thing. It's everywhere. Some guy caught it in a graveyard, like middle of nowhere. Belgrave or Belwick or some weird name. It's been all over Reddit and TikTok since yesterday." Claire smirked. "Let me guess. Shaky cam, creepy figure, distorted sound, and a warning in the comments not to watch after 3 a.m. "Shut up and watch it." Marcy pulled it up on her phone and turned it toward Claire. The video was barely a minute long. Poor resolution. The kind that made you question if it was recorded last week or in 1993. It opened with a man whispering into the camera, "This is Belgrave Cemetery. There's something wrong with this place." The camera tilted, revealing rusted gates, overgrown grass, crumbling headstones. Then it happened. For exactly 1 second, in the far left corner of the screen, stood a tall, black silhouette, motionless. The video cut to static. Claire snorted.
It's fake. Worst fake I've ever seen.
Marcy grinned. "Told ya." No depth to the figure. Lighting's wrong. And the blur around it's lazy. And that audio's been tampered with. Easy stuff. Hell, I could fake this on my laptop. Yeah, but the comment section's wild. People saying they've seen it. That it follows you after watching. Claire rolled her eyes. Urban legend clickbait. They always say that. Marcy shrugged. Still creeped me out. They moved on, laughing about exes, reminiscing about university days, and eventually saying their goodbyes at the door with a tight hug. The flat was quiet again. Claire brushed her teeth, set her alarm, and crawled under the covers, the distant hum of traffic a familiar lullaby. Sleep came fast, but it didn't stay. At 3:03 a.m., her eyes opened. No sound had woken her, no dream, just something. A dull tug behind the eyes, a flicker of thought gnawing in the back of her mind. That video. She sat up, heart calm but curious. Reaching for her laptop, she flipped it open. Her screen flared to life, illuminating the shadows of the room. She searched Belgrave Shadow Man. The video was easy to find. It was everywhere now. She clicked it. This time, she watched it more carefully. The shadow appeared again for exactly 1 second. Then she watched it again, and again, and again. By the 5th viewing, she wasn't mocking it. She was analysing it, slowing it, frame by frame. Her eyes narrowed. The figure was not just there. It was moving, ever so slightly, not stepping or walking, but pulling, drawing darkness from around the gravestones, from the overgrown hedges, from the space itself. Not light, but shadow was being absorbed. It was subtle, almost too subtle, but it was there. Claire adjusted the contrast, sharpened the frames, leaned in. What she thought was a flat graphic now had contours, density, and a flicker of impossible motion, like smoke drawn into a vacuum, like something hungry. Her heart began to thud softly. "Either this is the most brilliant fake I've ever seen," she whispered, voice barely audible in the dark. "Or..." She didn't finish the sentence, because in the reflection of her laptop screen, behind her, something moved. Claire barely remembered deciding to go. One moment, she was watching the video again, replaying that 1-second glimpse of the impossible. The next, she was booking a bed and breakfast in Belgrave, a speck of a town in the Midlands, barely clinging to the map. She told herself it was curiosity, that she needed a break, that this was just something to shake the dust off her routine, but in truth, the decision didn't feel like her own. It felt pulled from her, like the idea had always been there, waiting. The M1 was a slow-moving serpent of brake lights and agitated commuters. A 2.5-hour drive turned into 4 with stop-start traffic and a bleak grey sky threatening rain. Claire's car hummed steadily. She shouldn't have, but every so often she'd unlock her phone at red lights, tapping through to the video, just for a second, just to see. Her eyes would linger on the figure, the one everyone called the Shadow Man. She had it paused at the moment it stood by the crumbled headstone, drawing in the darkness. It fascinated her, not just the image, but the feeling. There was something inside it, or maybe something missing from it. It made her chest tighten and her hands clench the wheel. She arrived at Belgrave just after 4 p.m. The town was exactly what she expected. Small, outdated, and slightly hollow, like a place still waiting for the 1980s to end. The bed and breakfast sat at the edge of a field, once white-painted, now weathered to grey. A small hand-painted sign read, "Lavender View." The owner, a woman in her 60s, with a crooked smile and thick wool cardigan, gave Claire her key with a half-curious look. "Not many visitors this time of year," she said, "but you're welcome. You're in room 3, top of the stairs." "Thanks," Claire offered, checking in, then dropping her bags on the floral duvet of her room. The place smelled faintly of lavender, dust, and something old that had never fully aired out. She spent the next hour wandering the town, camera in hand. Belgrave had a single high street with a post office, a fish and chip shop, and a hardware store that looked like it hadn't changed hands in 40 years. The people were polite but distant, eyes lingering a second too long before returning to their routines. The cemetery wasn't far, just off a side road behind an abandoned chapel. She walked the perimeter first, then wandered inside. By daylight, it was disappointingly normal. Weathered gravestones leaned this way and that, weeds thick around the roots of old oaks. A few moss-covered angels stood with eroded faces and outstretched arms. She tried to line up the angle from the video near the far left edge. It was there, yes. The broken stone, the half-fallen iron fence. Nothing. No feeling, no presence, no dread. Just dead leaves and brittle silence. She sighed. What am I even doing here? Back at the B&B, she grabbed a sandwich from the mini-fridge downstairs and took it to her room. She barely ate half before collapsing fully dressed onto the bed, exhaustion seeping into her bones. The traffic, the search, the letdown of it all. It weighed her down like fog. Sleep took her instantly. She woke with a jolt. Her phone read 9:02 p.m. The window rattled faintly in the evening wind. Outside, Belgrave had sunk into the kind of rural darkness you don't get in cities. A full-bodied black, so thick it pressed against the glass. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. That's when she saw it. In the corner of her room, where the ceiling met the wall near the dresser, a shape loomed. She froze. A tall, motionless figure, darker than the shadows it stood in. She blinked. It didn't move. She sat straighter, staring. Nothing. The corner was empty, but her heart said otherwise. She felt it, that sensation of being watched, not by eyes but by presence, by intention, like something had waited for her to fall asleep, just so it could come closer. She stood, shivering. No more. She opened her bag, tossed in her camera, a flashlight, phone, power bank, zipped it shut and slung it over her shoulder. I'm ending this tonight, she muttered. Let's put this to bed. She opened the door to her room. The hallway was dim and quiet. She stepped out. The door swung shut behind her with a soft click, and the room fell still for a breath. Then, movement. From the corner where she had looked earlier, something stepped forward. It didn't emerge from shadow. It was shadow. A tall, formless figure with no eyes, no face, no sound, only visible because it was blacker than black. darker than night, a shape that drank the light around it. It had watched her sleep, and now it followed. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she tightened the strap on her camera. She tried to ignore it, told herself it was just the cold. But that wasn't true. She hadn't felt this way in years, not since the night of her mother's passing, when the world had felt hollow, wrong, as if some unseen truth had crept too close to the veil. She had become calloused, hardened by years of disappointment, detachment, and the modern cynicism of always seeing the trick behind the magic. But tonight was different. The cemetery gates were locked, the old iron arch sealed with a heavy rusted chain. She stood outside for a moment, staring through the bars. The trees beyond were still, the grass silver with dew. A voice inside her said, "Turn back." But another voice, deeper, older, whispered, "Go on." She climbed the low wall to the side, boots slipping on damp stone, and dropped silently into the soft, spongy soil below. Her flashlight flickered once before catching, casting long, twitching shadows across the crooked graves. She walked slowly. Every noise was louder than it should have been. The crunch of her boots, the whisper of the wind, the distant creak of tree limbs overhead. She found the spot, the exact place from the video. She could trace it now by memory, the cracked stone, the broken fence, the leaning willow. She lifted her camera, powered it on, and began recording. A full sweep, 360 degrees, slow, deliberate. Nothing. She paced, checked playback. Nothing. She sat on a moss-covered bench near the willow, the camera balanced on her knee. She watched, waited. The minutes stretched. Her breath fogged in the air. Her heart began to slow, retreating into the rhythm of disappointment. "This is stupid," she whispered. "I knew it."
I knew it was a hoax. There's nothing here.
She stood, brushing dew from her coat, and turned to leave. But she wasn't alone. From the shadows, it watched. There was no breath, no sound, no heartbeat, only awareness. It had no name, no need for one. It was not born, and it could not die. It had lived in the corners of sight, fed on forgotten glances, grown in the soil of belief. When no one believed, it slept. But now someone had come. Someone watched it back. It moved like fog across stone, unseen, yet always near, always just out of view. It clung to the underside of the gravestones, melted into tree bark, crept beneath the folds of the earth. Every time Claire lifted the camera, it drifted, one step beyond the lens, but it never left, not once. From its perspective, the world was a negative image, where light was the absence and shadow was presence. Claire glowed to it. She was brilliant, not with light, but with focus, obsession, curiosity. Most turned away after watching the video, but not her. She watched it again and again. She listened. She heard the whisper in the static. She fed it. That intrigued the watcher. It could unmake her in a moment. One flicker, one breath, and she would vanish, fall into herself like a star collapsing. But instead, it lingered. Not because it cared, but because she cared. And that made her interesting. Claire stood in the dark. She no longer felt watched. She felt seen. Her skin crawled, her neck stiffened. The trees whispered things that had no language. Her own shadow stretched wrong, angling toward the figure she could not see. She turned, camera raised. "Show yourself," she said quietly. Nothing. Only silence. But from a twisted branch above her, the shadow leaned closer. Claire packed her bag in silence. She folded her clothes with slow, deliberate care, as if by doing so she could press the uncertainty out of her body, compress it into something neat and finished. She hadn't slept well, but that wasn't new. No footage, she murmured to herself. No shadow, no presence, just weird feelings and me overthinking, hoping. She zipped the bag closed, took one last look around the little B&B room with its frilly curtains and fake roses, and muttered, "Thanks for nothing." The drive home was grey. The clouds hung low and heavy, and the M1 was its usual mess of red taillights and impatient horns. Claire barely noticed. Her mind wasn't on the road. It wasn't even on the night before. It was on the question she'd asked herself the moment she'd climbed back over the cemetery wall. What was I expecting? She parked outside her flat. The streets hummed with life. Dogs barking, buses groaning, someone shouting into a phone across the road. Claire unlocked her door, stepped inside, and closed it behind her. Silence fell, the ordinary kind. She made tea, sat in her chair, stared at the blank TV. Her world had resumed, flat, dull, predictable, the way it had always been. She pulled her laptop over, opened it. The video was still in her history. She hesitated, then shook her head and opened her browser settings. Her cursor hovered over clear cache. "I don't want this coming up again," she muttered. "Don't want to look like a lunatic." Just before she clicked, a comment caught her eye. It had been posted only an hour ago. "I found him. Guy who took the video. Tower block. Still alive. Barely." Claire's fingers twitched. She copied the address, mapped it. 52 minutes away. She stood, walked to the door, then froze, her hand on the knob. "What are you doing, Claire?" she whispered. "It's all nonsense. There is no beyond, no darkness, no watcher, no meaning. Just this." She looked back at her apartment. The same walls, the same silence, the same slow decay of days. She said softly, "I wanted there to be something more. Just something. Something that would pull her out of this life. This dull repetition, this modern noise that passed for living." She didn't believe in gods or ghosts, but she believed in something deeper than data. And for a moment, in the cemetery, she had felt something. A presence, a watching, a truth that wasn't comfortable, but was undeniably real. She grabbed her keys. Screw it! The door slammed behind her, but the flat wasn't empty. From the darkest corner, where no light reached even in daytime, something moved. It stepped forward, darker than shadow, a silhouette that seemed to absorb the room itself. It moved without noise, touched her bed, her teacup, her chair. It breathed in her scent. It was not confined to places. It followed obsession, and Claire had fed it well. The tower block in Acton was exactly what she expected. Grey, buzzing with the hum of dying fluorescence, stairwells stained with time, voices leaking through walls. She found the door, flat 17, and knocked hard. A beat of silence, then a voice, low, hoarse, almost pleading. "Who is it?" "Claire," she said. "I just want to talk." A pause. Then the voice again, sharper now. "No, just go away. Leave me alone. I told you all to stop. I'm tired of you people coming round here." Claire leaned close to the door. "I can make it stop," she said softly. Just tell me the truth. Tell me how you faked the video. That's all I want. I'll tell everyone. You'll never hear from anyone again." Another long pause, then, slowly, the lock clicked. The door opened a crack. A pale, shaking eye peered through. Then it opened. The flat smelled of sweat, metal, and old fear. The windows were sealed, edges taped shut, with layers of foil and cardboard. The only light came from UV lamps placed in every corner, casting a sickly, purplish glow over the room. It looked like a forensic crime scene, filtered through madness. The man who had filmed the video was maybe in his mid-30s, but he looked 50. His face was drawn, lips cracked, eyes bloodshot and twitching. "Yes," he said, voice brittle. "Tell them it's fake. Tell them I faked it. That's all it is. A joke. Just get them to stop." "How did you fake it?" Claire asked. He didn't answer. "I mean, the pull-in shadows, the frame distortion. Did you use filters, overlays? Just help me understand." He looked at her, lips twitching, then said flatly, "I just did. Put that in your blog or whatever. Just say it's fake." "You don't sound sure." "I am." "You're lying." "I said I faked it," he snapped. He began pacing. His skin glistened with sweat, even in the cold. Then something in him changed. His posture snapped upright. He pointed at her with a trembling hand. You brought it here." Claire blinked. "What?" "You led it here." His voice rose, manic. "You've been to Belgrave. I can see it on you. You felt it. It knows. It follows belief. It followed you. It used you. It wants me now." "What are you talking about?" "You don't understand. You brought it right to me. You've killed me." He lunged at the door, flung it open. "Get out." Claire stumbled backward into the hallway. "Get out," he screamed again, slamming the door with a force that rattled the frame.
Get out! Get out! You brought it! You led it here!
Inside she heard movement, furniture being dragged, glass breaking, frantic mumbling. Claire stood, motionless, her breath fogging in the stale corridor air. Then she turned, walked the long concrete balcony, row after row of doors, empty silence. But at the far end, a figure stood, tall, still, darker than the air itself. The lights above it flickered, and then it was gone. As Claire descended the cracked concrete stairwell of the tower block, her phone buzzed. "Marcy, let's get drunk." She stared at the message for a moment, thumb hovering. Then she smiled. The bar was warm and too loud, just the way people liked it when they were trying to forget. Music pulsed like a heartbeat through cheap speakers, and the lights stuttered in reds and blues, washing faces in false emotions. Claire had always hated bars like this, and yet she laughed, she drank, she danced, because that's what everyone else was doing, because it was easier than trying to explain, because pretending was simpler than admitting she'd been followed out of the dark. Marcy spun beside her, glass in hand, yelling over the music. "See? You just needed to let go for once." Claire nodded, laughing too loud. She let the drink burn down her throat. Another. But she was lying. She wasn't dancing. She was drowning. She didn't want the drink. She didn't want the noise. She wanted the silence, the truth behind the veil, the thing she almost saw when her life was quiet enough to listen. But instead, she wore the mask again, the smile. How many of us pretend to be what we think is acceptable, and how long until we forget what we really are underneath? Claire had spent years playing the role, normal, functioning, unfazed, but she wasn't. Not really. She never was. As the lights flickered overhead, she stopped. She froze mid-step. Across the room, in the corner where the light didn't quite reach, something moved. It didn't move like a person. It absorbed movement, drank motion into itself, tall, still, featureless. It wasn't just dark. It was darker than the dark, a negative space cut into the world. Claire stepped off the dance floor, eyes locked, walking slowly toward the shadow. She felt like she was falling, not forward, but inward. Claire. Marcy grabbed her arm. Claire snapped her gaze away. Did you see that? Marcy blinked. See what? Claire looked back. Nothing. Just a wall, stained with sweat and flashing light. Marcy squinted at her. Looks like you've had one too many. Come on, let's call it. It's late. Claire nodded, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. The taxi ride was silent. Marcy got out first, leaving with a wave and a yawn. Claire stared out the window. Empty streets, passing buildings, and there, by a lamppost, the figure, not moving, not waving, just watching. Then, gone. A blink. Had she imagined it? The taxi dropped her at her flat. She climbed the steps slowly, the hallway echoing with the soft drag of her boots. Back inside, she dropped her coat, sat down at her desk, and flipped open the laptop. Reflexively, she opened Reddit. Her heart slowed as she read the headline. Break-in. Belgrave video source found dead in flat. Suspected suicide. The room felt suddenly colder. She stared. Her hands trembled. Did I? She whispered. Had she led something there? Had she fed it? Was it her fault? She closed the lid. The screen went black, but not entirely. In the reflection, behind her, a figure. Blacker than the screen, blacker than the shadows. She spun in her chair. Nothing. Her breath caught in her throat. What are you? She shouted into the empty air. A muffled bang on the wall, a neighbour's voice. Keep it down in there. She looked back at the black screen, then whispered, not to herself, but to the thing behind the veil. You must be real, she said. I saw you. You followed me. You touched my life. You touched him. The silence grew thick, heavy. Then she said, quieter still, I've been lying to myself. She stood, walked to the mirror, stared at her own reflection. I wear their face, say their words, laugh their laughs. I pretend to be who I think I should be, not who I am. I've lived a life of pretending, smiling at the noise, nodding at the small talk. And the truth is, I'm hollow. She turned to the darkest corner of the room. I've been waiting for you, hoping you were real, that something would come, something final, something true. She stepped closer to the shadow. Voice shaking, she whispered, Come take me, release me, set me free. And the room held its breath. In the darkness, it listened. I wanted to be someone. Her voice cracked as she sat on the cold wooden floor, knees hugged to her chest, her eyes fixed on the empty shadows that coiled around the corners of the room. I was scared. I wanted to try. I gave in. I wanted to be me, really truly me, and I failed. The room was still. The silence was not empty. It listened. I thought maybe if I played along, if I dulled everything I loved, if I lowered my voice and bit my tongue and smiled when I wanted to scream, Maybe I'd belong somewhere, anywhere. She exhaled, trembling. I gave up trying to shine, because shining makes people look. And when people look, they judge, they reject, they fear. So I became nothing. Her voice grew steady, almost calm. They say man is a noble thing, that we are capable of greatness, of invention, of soul, but we trade it all away, bit by bit, for acceptance. We lie to ourselves every day. We stop asking, what do I want to be? And start asking, who do they want me to be? Her hands gripped her knees tighter. I had something once. I was something, but I cut it out of myself. I smothered it so I could fit into the blandness. I wore the mask. I became the echo of their comfort. She closed her eyes. I betrayed myself. The shadows began to stir, not as movement, as intent. They pulled in, condensed, as if the room were exhaling all light. The darkness didn't gather, it withdrew, revealing something at its core. It wasn't smoke, it wasn't mist, it was conscious shadow, and it was taking form. Long limbs, a tall silhouette, darkness folding into itself to create density, weight, shape, and then a man, old, older than the memory of time, skin like weathered parchment, stretched too thin over bone, sunken eyes in deep sockets, almost lost in pools of black. A few grey strands clung to his scalp. His robes shimmered with fold of living darkness. He stepped forward without sound and sat on the chair across from her. One skeletal hand rested on the armrest. Claire saw the hand, skin translucent, veins like thin rivers of ink, fingers like twisted branches. The sight of him was sickening, not grotesque, but wrong, the kind of wrong that drains something from you. She felt it in her bones, a sickness that wasn't illness, but truth. He said nothing. He just stared. Claire looked up, breathing shallow. You, she whispered. You killed that man. The creature tilted its head slightly, as if humouring her. Yes, my dear. And I'm going to kill you. Her body flinched, her chest locked. But, he continued with a faint smile that cracked his skin, isn't that what you wanted? I don't want to die, she managed. The creature's tone grew sharper, colder. No, you are afraid of dying, but you do not want to live. The silence that followed was not absence, it was presence. Then he spoke, not with a voice, but with depth, as if truth itself was borrowing a throat. You speak of truth, of discovery, of being something real. Do you think this comes without cost? The sin is not in failing. The sin is in denying the part of yourself that reaches upward, that dares. Mankind, so noble, so brilliant, and yet they clip their own wings to avoid standing too far above their peers. They fear becoming what they were meant to be, because it might make others uncomfortable. So they shrink, they dim, they rot, and when they die, they are mourned not for who they were, but for who they never had the courage to become. He leaned forward slightly. You, Claire, are a flame buried in cold ash. You asked for meaning. You invited me. Now meaning has arrived. Claire sat frozen. Who are you? The creature leaned back, hands resting gently on the chair like a king upon a throne. Oh, my name would mean nothing to you, he said softly. She swallowed. Are you the Shadow Man? He chuckled, a sound that cracked something old in the air. Shadow Man. Perhaps. But that's a child's name for something they fear, but don't understand. I am an elder. He smiled, and skin cracked from the effort. You might know us as vampires. She blinked. He raised a finger, though I detest the word. It is, how shall I put it, limiting. You see, humans write their little stories, and in doing so, reduce us to myths and monsters. They imagine us as beasts who drink blood, sleep in coffins, and turn to bats. He scoffed, as if hunger were our only gift. His gaze sharpened. They forget the mind, the centuries, the clarity. Do you think, in all those years we learned nothing, that we would be unchanged by time? I have outlived kings and gods. I've walked beside men who now live only in legend, and they were infants compared to what I know. Every man I've ever met thought himself wise until he stood before me, and then they wept. He paused, then gave her the smallest nod. Ah, excuse me. I seem to be drifting. Where were we? Claire's voice cracked. Are you really going to kill me? Drink my blood? Of course, he replied gently. You must feed me. You invited me. You called me. You came to me. You begged me to follow. He spread his hand slightly. Now I am here. I would hate to disappoint. Claire could not move. The elder leaned back slightly, as though granting her a final mercy. But before it ends, he said, I will give you something rare. He smiled again, indulgent, almost paternal. You may ask me anything. She stared. Anything? She whispered. Anything. I have lived for hundreds of years. I have walked through truths that would destroy minds. Men live but a flicker of time, yet even in that flicker, they create wonders. Now imagine what I have seen, what I understand. He leaned closer, and the shadows bent inward around him. Ask me, Claire Holloway. Ask me what they never dared to know. The room held its breath. Claire sat across from him, this ancient thing, her body trembling with cold and fear, her spirit hollowed by something far deeper than the threat of death. He waited, eyes sunken, face unmoving, shadows folded into themselves at his feet, whispering as if they could feel the weight of the moment. Claire breathed in, out. Then she looked him in the eyes, those wells of centuries, of endings, and said the words, I have nothing left to lose, so I'll ask. Her voice broke, then steadied. Who am I? What was my purpose here? Because I see nothing, no meaning, just dust and noise and failure. The elder did not blink. He nodded. Slowly, almost reverently, then he stood. The room darkened further, not from shadow, but from something like gravity, the weight of truth. He spoke. That, Claire Holloway, is the only question worth asking. He took a step closer, and the air turned cold, not like winter, but like the breath of something that lived in the void between stars. You are not your job, not your bank account, not the faces you wear for others. You are your choices, your convictions. You are the flame or the ash, and for too long you have chosen to dim yourself. He circled her slowly, like a wolf pacing firelight. You asked for purpose, but purpose is not given. It is forged. It is the act of taking what you are and using it to shape the world. You were born with the one spark that defines your kind, the spark of will. But instead of kindling it into something bright, something rare, you buried it. You sacrificed it on the altar of approval. Claire trembled. He stopped behind her, voice like old thunder. The world teaches people to hide, to be soft, to be small, to trade greatness for peace, truth for comfort. They are taught that being liked is more important than being honest, that wanting more, being more, is arrogant, that striving is shameful, and so they starve in silence while smiling at dinner tables, starve in crowded rooms, pretending to belong, starve until their souls rot inside the shell that they've painted with smiles and apologies. Claire closed her eyes. She saw herself, waving at colleagues, nodding to men who spoke over her, laughing politely at jokes she hated, pretending to be normal. Swallowing herself piece by piece, the elder continued, "You want to know why you see no meaning? Because you looked outward. You searched for signs, symbols, divine whispers. But the meaning was never outside of you. It was never hiding in the stars or some holy plan. Meaning is the act of creation. The moment you take your mind, your soul, and say, 'This is what I will build of myself.' That is your purpose, to become what only you could become, and you abandoned it." Claire opened her eyes. Her voice was small, broken. "I didn't know how." The elder leaned down until his withered face was inches from hers. His breath smelled of dust, of grave soil, of burned pages. "You didn't fail because you were weak. You failed because you chose the lie. You chose to be nothing, to be palatable. You betrayed the only thing that was ever yours, yourself." He stood. "And now you ask me for mercy?" "No, I am not mercy. I am consequence." Claire collapsed to the floor, arms wrapped around herself. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not from fear, but from the shame of recognition. He returned to the chair, the shadows curling at his feet. "You are not alone, Claire," he said. "They all do it, almost all. They live lies and call it kindness. They shatter their brilliance into a million tolerable pieces. They die forgotten, and the world remains safe." He tilted his head. "But not you. You saw the shadow. You came to it. You begged it to come." Claire looked up, her voice a whisper. "Are you really going to kill me?" The elder smiled again, and it was a horrible thing. "You already killed yourself." Then softer, "But I will finish the work." Marcy cried when she got the news. Claire was gone. They found her in her flat 2 days later, after she missed 2 meetings and never answered her phone. The door had been locked from the inside. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, just silence. The official report was vague. Strange illness, sudden collapse, extreme blood loss, unexplained cause. The coroner said she was pale, cold, and unnaturally still, but it was her face that stayed with them. There was no pain, no fear, only a look of calm. Eyes closed, lips parted ever so slightly, as though, in her final breath, she had finally found what she'd always been searching for. Some swore they saw her smile, not a smile of madness or surrender, but the smile of a woman who had stood at the edge of the void, gazed into it, and understood. She looked like someone who had made peace. One officer said quietly, like she'd finally discovered that which men spend an eternity to discover. They buried her on a quiet day. Simple service, small turnout. Marcy left a rose on the casket and whispered, "I hope you found what you were looking for, Claire." In a forgotten corner of Belgrave Cemetery, where the trees grow twisted and the light never quite reaches the earth, a figure stood beneath a crumbling angel statue. Tall, still, darker than the night itself. It watched the wind move the leaves. Then slowly, it vanished. Not into the shadows, but into the world.
You wish to know how a vampire is born? Then I will tell you. Or the Professor will. Through his tales, if you dare to listen.
Before the world fractured, before God's ward and cursed blood ran in rivers, before she was Silithria, the red veil of the elders, she was Isadora Liss, and Isadora Liss was a goddess of her own stage. The velvet curtains of the royal Orpheum swayed as the gaslights dimmed. A hush fell across the crowd. Nobles and dignitaries pressed into balconies, merchants and soldiers below, all held in suspense. And then her voice, like honey dripped over crystal, like sorrow in bloom.
Que les astres
It was a spell, drawn from some ancient place of heartbreak and hunger. Even those who despised opera were held captive by it. The kind of voice sirens might kill to mimic. The orchestra dared not drown her. Even the violins bowed with reverence. Her red hair, unpinned and loose for the final aria, shimmered beneath the footlights, catching fire with every movement. She sang of loss, of stars that burned too briefly, of love she would never know. And when the last note faded into silence, there were no claps. Not yet. There was breathless stillness, then thunderous applause. Backstage, the mood shifted. Isadora stood before her mirror, dabbing the sweat from her brow with a silk cloth. The dressing room smelled faintly of roses and powder. Knock after knock came, each a suitor, cloaked in false humility or expensive cologne. "May I offer you a drink, my muse? You sang like a creature born of stardust tonight. You belong on more than stages, Isadora. Let me build you a palace." She turned them away like spoiled wine. "You mistake admiration for entitlement," she said to one. "You mistake talent for possession," she said to another. To the most persistent, "Your lips move, but your mind lags behind. Do come back when it catches up." She smiled, but never softly. Isadora Liss was known not just for her voice, but for her mind. Sharp as broken glass, and just as unforgiving. She had seen what love did to women, watched sopranos married off to counts and crushed beneath boredom, watched them become the decoration of men with fat wallets and thin souls. Isadora wanted none of it. She wanted music, mastery, immortality, on her terms. And yet, that night, as the gas lamps flickered in the cobbled streets and the fog rolled in thick from the canals, she felt a tremor in the air. Something ancient stirred, watching, listening. Beyond the curtain, beyond the roses thrown at her feet, something had heard her song. Not a man, not a mortal, but something that would soon offer her eternity, not as a gift, but as a sentence. The air was still thick with the afterglow of music. The perfume of crushed roses lingered on her dressing table, intermingled with candle smoke and vanity lights that buzzed faintly, as though still humming with her final note. Isadora Liss sat in silence, her fingers brushing over the velvet armrest, still half lost in the world she had conjured moments ago. A soft knock stirred her back to reality, not the eager, frantic tapping of a suitor, but something slower, composed, intentional. "Enter," she said without looking up. The door opened without a creak, revealing a man. He was tall, his coat of deep obsidian trimmed in silver thread that shimmered like starlight. His eyes were grey, not cold, but vast, like a library filled with forgotten languages. His presence was weight without pressure, gravity without threat. "I do not come to offer admiration," he said. His voice was low and smooth, like warm wine poured into a dark glass. "You do not need it, and I do not offer it." Isadora looked up, eyebrow arched. "Then why come at all?" He paused, regarding her not like a man looks at a woman, but as a scholar observes a rare celestial event. "To say well done. Just that. Nothing more. No lavish compliments, no desperate pleas for attention." His tone was final, yet left a door ajar. She sat straighter. "Who are you?" He smiled, but only with his eyes. "Oh, just a lover of things that are beyond man." And with that, he turned and walked away, his footsteps making no sound against the floorboards. The door closed behind him with perfect quiet. For the first time in years, Isadora was intrigued. It was nearly midnight when she gathered her things. The theatre had quieted. Only the odd echo of boots or laughter from the far end of the corridor reminded her that life still moved beyond the performance. She slipped her long cloak over her shoulders and prepared to leave. Then another knock, sharper, needier. She knew it before it opened. "Please no," she whispered under her breath. The door creaked open. A man stood there, one she had dismissed a dozen times. Victor Holden, wealthy, entitled, the type who mistook persistence for romance. His eyes were glassy with drink or obsession or both. "I love you, Isadora," he said, stepping in uninvited. She did not rise, did not blink. "I've told you, I want nothing to do with you. My art is my calling, not shackles like your affection. And we are not right for each other." Victor's lips trembled. "I could give you everything." "I already have everything," she said, standing now, taller than her slight frame should allow. "No one person owns another. We are individuals, and we must act as such." The words were calm, final, surgical. To her, they were truth. To him, they were mockery. Victor's face twisted. What began as hurt collapsed inward to shame, and shame gave way to rage. He reached for the bottle of champagne he had brought, his pathetic offering now forgotten on the table. His hand clenched it like a weapon. "What do I have to do for you to be mine?" He shouted it, trembling with desperation. Her gaze didn't flinch. "Be gone!" And she turned to leave. The crack of glass, a flash of motion, the scream of something primal breaking. The jagged end of the bottle caught her just below the jawline. A gasp, then blood. So much blood. Victor stepped back, staring at the red on his hand, his face, her neck. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a wheeze came out. Then he ran. Isadora collapsed, one hand at her throat, the other clawing at the wall. Crimson stained the floor beneath her as her vision swam. She fell to her knees, choking on breath that would not come. The sound of rushing footsteps. Stage hands burst in, shouting, shouting. Someone cried out in horror, and then the world turned black. The headlines were printed in bold across every broadsheet in the city. A voice, silenced. Isadora Lease, maimed in brutal attack. Opera's brightest star falls silent. Tragedy at the Orpheum, the end of an era. Candles were lit outside the theatre. Flowers lined the streets. For days, mourners wept for the loss of a voice that had lifted them to heaven. But the city moved quickly. Mourning was fashionable for a week at most. And then came the questions. 2 weeks had passed since that bloody night. Inside her hospital room, marble floors, tall windows, expensive silence, Isadora sat in a high-backed chair, a book in her lap, though her eyes barely moved across the page. The wound had been patched with skill. The surgeons spoke of miracles. She lived. The blade had missed the carotid artery by mere millimeters, a breath of fate. But her voice was gone, not by choice, not by damage alone. Something deeper had withered, cut not from flesh, but from within. She hadn't spoken a single word since the attack. Opera owners, patrons and investors came like grieving family, but their mourning was not for her. They came with questions, not flowers, with contracts, not prayers. Will you sing again, Isadora? We have a 5-season investment. Your comeback could draw more than your absence. Surely your silence is only temporary. Modern medicine has healed worse. You'll see. You just need rest. She gave them nothing, not a word, only her eyes, cold, unmoved. In solitude, she tried once. Alone in her room, she spoke a single word. It rasped out of her like gravel against stone. She blinked. No fear, no tears. Only the confirmation of what she already knew. Whatever voice once dwelled within her was gone. The next time someone came, a doctor, a patron, another leech, she wrote her answer on a small slate beside her bed. I can no longer sin. I will not speak. In a mahogany-panelled boardroom across the city, men in gold-trimmed waistcoats and pearl cravats gathered in low light, brandy swirling in their glasses. She's finished, one of them muttered, fingers tapping a contract filled with now meaningless clauses. For years, we've sunk coin into her performances, promised seasons, tours, international rights. Another slammed a glass down. And for what? A third leaned forward, eyes narrowed, calculating. If only she had died that night. The others turned. At least then we'd have the insurance claim. The policy was generous. I made sure of that. A few looked uncomfortable. One chuckled dryly. But this, the first said, this is the worst case scenario. Not dead, not profitable, just silent. The second man, his teeth too white, his smile too wide, sighed. Well, he said with cruel calm, she's not out of the woods yet, is she? An infection, a complication. These things do happen, even in the best of hospitals. A pause, then a smirk. We may still have our resolution, one way or another. Laughter echoed through the room, dull, lifeless laughter, the kind spoken by men who weighed life against profit. Back in the quiet of her room, Isadora sat unmoving, her reflection staring back at her from the window pane. She had heard their words, all of them, and within that silence, something was growing. Not rage, not grief, but something older, a seed, a hunger. Something was waiting for her to break. She would not, but she would change. Hospitals were meant to be places of healing, but tonight the halls carried another intent. The lights flickered, the rain whispered against tall glass windows, and distant thunder rolled like drums for a funeral procession not yet named. Somewhere in the building, a nurse hummed to herself just before the power stuttered once and failed. The quiet that followed was absolute. Isadora Leith sat alone in a hospital room that was not hers. She had moved there in the dead of night. She'd told no one. She left no note. But she knew they would come. Not from letters, not from rumours, but in the tone of those men, in their measured voices and hollow condolences. She had lived a life around the wealthy, the invested, the desperate. She knew what men like them did when something that they could not control threatened to devalue. Her silence was not mystery, it was liability. They would not wait for infection or misfortune. They would make their own. So she waited, still unmoving. She no longer cared for survival, only for truth. If they came, so be it. She would face them as she was, broken, voiceless, yet completely, utterly herself. And then it began. The crash of glass, the sharp slam of a door, boots, voices, check every room. Where is she? She remained seated in the corner of the room, back straight, expression calm. Her fingers traced the edge of the chair's armrest. She heard them shout, threaten, curse. Then, "We will find you." Her door burst open. A masked figure stood in the threshold, his scarf hiding all but his eyes. They met hers and something faltered. Isadora did not flinch. She looked at him as if he were nothing. Then, for the first time since that night, she spoke. "Come to claim your investment." Her voice was raw, scratching and deep, not the voice of a songbird, but of something crawling from a forgotten tomb. The man froze. "She's here," he shouted. Two more rushed in. One chuckled. "Nothing personal, love," he said. Her answer was flat. "Do what you must." They advanced. 3 shadows in the dark, knives ready, masks impersonal, and then... "Stop!" The voice was silk on steel, sharp, commanding, otherworldly. All 3 turned. A figure stood at the far end of the hallway, his coat unruffled by wind that did not exist indoors, his presence like a weight, falling into the world. The stranger, the elegant man from the theatre. "Why break such a perfect instrument?" he asked gently. "Get him," one of the thugs barked, "or we'll do you as well." "Dare," the man said softly, "to threaten me." Then he vanished, not in a blink, not in a flash, but as if the shadows themselves had pulled him from sight. Before Isadora could process it, he was behind the first man. A whisper, a sound like air escaping lungs. The first thug fell to the ground with a soft thud, body limp, eyes frozen wide. The second turned to run, too slow. The stranger's hand reached out, then shadow swallowed him. The third didn't even scream. Isadora didn't move. When it was done, he returned, not a hair out of place. His eyes, cool and ancient, regarded her with something like respect. "You'd best come with me, my dear," he said. "I believe they'll keep trying to silence you. Permanently." She stood. No hesitation. No questions of morality or disbelief. Only one thing left to know. "Who are you?" she rasped. He smiled faintly. "Oh, I am Alaric." They did not walk. They did not flee. They moved like breath across candlelight, like ink bleeding into paper. When Alaric touched her, it was as if the world sighed and time folded inward. Her body dissolved into shadow, her consciousness stretching and twisting, passing between fractured slivers of space. The hospital, the city, the pain, it all fell behind like a stage curtain dropping to the floor. When her form reassembled, the nausea hit her instantly. Her stomach turned, her vision swam. She fell to her knees. "It will pass," Alaric said, watching her without concern. "The first time always unsettles the flesh." She inhaled slowly, focused, controlled it, and then she stood. "I know who you are now," she rasped, her voice scraping the still air like broken glass. "But what are you?" He tilted his head, expression unreadable. "I am Alaric. I have watched you for many years, heard your voice long before others knew to listen. It disturbs me," he said with a trace of bitterness, "that the very night I chose to speak to you, another saw it too." He paused, his voice low. "And that was the night you lost it all." Isadora's response came without hesitation. "I've lost nothing," she said. "My voice has changed, but it does not define me." Alaric smiled, not kindly, but approvingly. "Exactly. That is why I came to you that night, not to praise you. You don't need approval." I said, "Well done," because you endured a world that never wanted you to survive it. You stood tall, not to be seen, but because it is who you are. Unshaken, undiluted. Your voice was a rebellion. Even those who envied it couldn't look away. "And now it's gone," she whispered, "but I still stand tall." Alaric nodded slowly. "What if you could have it back?" he asked. She looked at him, truly looked. "To sing again?" she asked. "To do what I feared for years, until I dared to do it?" She drew breath. "Yes, I would like that." "But at what cost?" she added. Alaric looked down, as if weighing a truth too heavy for words. "The cost," he said, "is your life, as you know it. You will die and be reborn, not only with your voice, but with power, strength, freedom. But you will lose your love for mankind. You will drift from its warmth. Connection will grow distant." She studied him, her eyes hard but not afraid. "Will I be able to sing?" she asked. "Yes," he answered, voice sure and still. "You will sing again." She looked past him then, into the darkness beyond the chamber, where the air whispered of ancient things and unseen horrors. "Then that is what matters," she said. "Not if they like my voice, not if they approve, only that I can create with it." He smiled again. Something darker stirred behind it. "Oh, Isadora," he said softly, "you will do more than create." Her breath was steady, not nervous, not afraid, accepting. She tilted her head slightly, exposing her pale neck. A final gesture of consent, of resolve. Alaric stepped forward, reverent and quiet. No seduction, no false intimacy. This was death. This was ritual. His lips brushed the skin, then his fangs sank in deep. She didn't cry out. She didn't wince. She accepted. Her body slumped to the floor, blood draining, skin turning alabaster. The warmth of life slipped from her limbs like a silk robe falling to the floor. She didn't resist it. She embraced it. Elaric knelt beside her still form. "Now," he whispered, "you shall become one of us. An elder, a powerful one." He slit his own palm with a blackened blade, dark blood welling up. As he chanted in a language that trembled the walls, he let it fall into her mouth, bit by bit, drop by drop. The shadows bent toward him, the torches dimmed, listening. His voice echoed in that ancient tongue, no syllables a mortal could repeat, no rhythm a living mind could hold. When the words ceased, he placed his hand gently on her chest and waited. Minutes passed, then hours, then a twitch, a spasm. Her fingers clenched, her body jerked, and then she rose, not like one awakening, but like a puppet pulled upright by unseen strings. Her eyes opened. They were the same, and not deeper, hungrier. Her expression remained serene, but it was no longer human. Alaric watched in silence. She looked around slowly. She could hear everything. The walls breathing, the stones settling, the spiders spinning their webs. She turned and saw a gnat across the chamber. She could see its wings fluttering in detail no mortal eye could comprehend. The shadows whispered to her, and she whispered back. She opened her mouth. Her voice, silk, smooth, effortless. She smiled. There was no pain now, no damage, only sound, perfect and absolute. She opened her mouth again and sang. A single note. It rang like crystal in a cathedral, pure and transcendent. But then she sang again, this time with intention, with hunger. The note that came next echoed like a scream from a dying world. Windows cracked, glass shattered. The torches flickered violently. The walls moaned under pressure that should not exist. Even the shadows flinched. And then she stopped and smiled. "I like this," she said. Alaric finally stood. "Then go." She turned to him, confused. "Go?" "We must never meet again. You are an elder now. One of us." He stepped into the half-light, his presence already fading. "We each have our powers, and I can see yours. Your voice, as I always knew, is your gift, your weapon, your curse." He approached her one final time. "Hide from the sun. Hide from the hunters. Stay in the shadows. Do not reveal what you've become. If they see it, if they know." He paused. "They will never let you exist in their world." She nodded slowly, absorbing the truth without emotion. "You will need to feed," he added, voice cooler now. "There is an abundance here in this city. I would choose the ones who wronged you first." He turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing," he said, not looking back. "There is another. His name is Eldritch. One of us, the best of us." He looked at her then, with something close to fondness. "Seek him out. You speak his language, more than I ever could." And with that, he vanished into shadow, leaving only the silence and Silithria standing in it, reborn. The city slept, unaware. She did not. Silithria moved through the night like a forgotten melody, smooth, eerie, impossible to follow. The shadows obeyed her, parting with reverence, letting her pass as though she were born of them. She needed no effort, no thought. She was a ghost written into the ink of the alleyways, gliding from rooftop to street to silence. She arrived at his home just before midnight. Victor, the man who had destroyed her, and ran. She stood outside the manor, cloaked in shadow, observing through the frost-laced window pane. He sat alone, pacing, drinking. His face was drawn, pale with regret and fear. His hands trembled as he lit yet another candle, as if more light would keep her from reaching him. She could have entered. She felt it, the power to do so. But something in her blood whispered restraint, not fear. Tradition, a law older than stone, something sacred even now. So she knocked, soft, measured. He froze. "Victor," she whispered, her voice curling through the door like perfume. "It's me." His breath caught. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered. I. His voice cracked. "It can't be." "I forgive you," she said, her tone sweet, tinged with mourning. "I want to be with you. I came back. For you." The door creaked open. He stood in the threshold, eyes wide, a trembling wreck of the man he had once tried to be. "How?" he stammered. "How are you even... Are you all right?" "I am," she said softly. "I didn't mean to. I was just angry. I was scared. I'm so sorry, Isadora." She tilted her head, lips forming a faint, eerie smile. "Are you going to leave me standing here all night?" she asked. "Or will you invite me in?" He blinked. Of course. Come in, please, come in." And with that, the barrier fell. She stepped into the house, gliding past him like smoke. He spoke quickly, nervously, rambling. "I've been in such a state. I couldn't sleep. I thought I killed you. I thought... Oh God, Isadora, I'm so glad it wasn't serious." She turned to him, her face lit only by the dim flicker of a single candle. "It is so like you," she said, voice low and measured, "to destroy what you cannot have, what is better than you. You must pull down. You don't say, 'Well done.' You ask, who did she trample to get there?" She took a slow step toward him. "Somehow, you have shaped this world, and how men are supposed to think in it, and in doing so, you have kept women, like me, from ever truly being." Victor's face twisted in confusion and fear. I didn't..." She raised her hand. "I see now," she said. "The simplest way to fix this world is to remove what's wrong with it." Then her mouth opened. A single note escaped. Not a scream, not a wail. Music, but it was not made for mortal ears. It vibrated through the walls, shook the furniture. Victor's eyes rolled back in his head as he screamed, blood pouring from his ears. He collapsed to the floor, writhing. And then the hunger struck her. It was not a craving. It was a need, ancient and wild. Her fangs extended as though they had always been part of her. With a grace that turned primal in an instant, she leapt, her voice still humming through the air, vibrating like strings pulled too tight. She struck. Teeth pierced flesh. And there, in the flickering candlelight, Isadora Silithria fed. Her first night, her first death, her first aria of vengeance. The manor stood tall atop the hill, its gilded edges proof of what the world rewarded: manipulation, greed, possession masquerading as patronage. The home of those men, the investors, the patrons, the vultures who fed on her voice while plotting her extinction. Tonight, the lights inside burned bright, glasses clinked, laughter laced with lies. They were celebrating. Perhaps some new star they hoped to replace her with, or more likely, congratulating themselves for minimizing the damage of her loss. They believed her dead. They believed wrong. She arrived in silence. The gates didn't resist her. The shadows obeyed. She walked without fear, without shame, without apology. She was not here to plead. She was not here to explain. She was here to speak. Inside, a servant passed the corridor. She tilted her head, her voice like honey laced with dusk. "Would you be so kind as to let me in?" she whispered. He turned, stunned by her beauty, struck dumb by her presence. Of course, my lady," he stammered, opening the door wide. "Come in." She stepped through. The doors to the banquet hall flew open. The room fell silent. There she stood, crimson gown flowing like blood made silk, red hair crowned with shadow, her presence a living contradiction, beautiful and terrible, radiant and absolute. One of the men dropped his glass. Another muttered, "Impossible." She stepped forward, unblinking. "No," she said, voice like velvet drawn over razors. "Inevitable." The man who had once spoken of insurance money stepped back, colour draining from his face. "You were dead?" "No," she replied with something like amusement. "I was silenced. There's a difference." She walked into their midst as if she owned the very concept of consequence. "You plotted to kill what you could not understand, because I refused to kneel, because I refused to flatter your egos or feign weakness for your approval." Her eyes swept across the room. "I did not sing for you. I sang because that is who I am. That is my truth. My soul made sound." She paused before the head of the table, where the investor sat like a king in his castle, now trembling. "You believed your opinion gave me value. You were mistaken. I was not born to bend. I do not ask. I do not wait. I create." Her voice sharpened. "I am not a reflection of your investments. I am not a product you brand or sell. I do not seek to be liked, only to exist purely without distortion." She stepped onto the center of the banquet table, towering over them now. "You backed me because I filled your pockets. You betrayed me because I threatened your control. Now I return to make one thing clear." She opened her mouth. A single pure note shattered the chandelier above. It was not just sound, it was judgment. Glass rained like diamonds. Windows cracked. Blood poured from ears and eyes. Screams erupted, cut short by the second note. This one bent the world. The walls shook. Shadows burst forth like wolves unchained. She moved through them, fast, elegant, merciless. Each man met their end, not with glory, but with irrelevance. They would be footnotes in a story far greater than their shallow lives. The final one she approached knelt in terror. "Please," he whispered. "Why?" She leaned in close. "Because I can." And then silence. Months later, the opera house was filled again. Word had spread of a new performer, one whose voice was unlike anything ever heard before. A mystery, a miracle. The curtain opened. The announcer stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, barely hiding his awe, "after the tragic loss of Isadora Liss, we are honored to welcome her successor, a voice reborn. She performs under a new name in honor of her transformation." He took a breath, voice trembling. I give you Silithria. The curtains parted. She stepped into the light, alone, whole, eternal. And when she sang, the world forgot to breathe.
And that is my story, but there are many more tales to chill you from the Professor.